We are live. Welcome, Neal, Daedalus.
Thank
Neal,
you, Mark.
parentheses, Daedalus. You're doing this graciously to help me in this exploration of Catholicism. Uh, we might say as a life practice or faith or conversion. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this phase in my life. Um, at the very least, it's an education. And I'm learning how very different the two branches of the greater Christian faith, um, the Catholic stream is from the Protestant stream. That's my experience. I'm curious about your experience because you are yourself. You've gone through this. You were a Protestant, serious or lapsed at various points. I've heard you use the word deconstructed. And then you came back to faith and entered into the Catholic expression, shall we say. So, what's your experience with this thing?
Yeah, I grew up PCUSA, which is Presbyterian Church of USA. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a mainline Protestant denomination. And I went to church every Sunday up until I was in college when my parents said, well, it's up to you now. Um, and I started falling away in high school, I would say. And then 9/11 was a crystallizing event. Um, but it was just a slow, gradual thing where I didn't see it as necessary, I would say. And then, and yeah, I don't necessarily want to recount my entire story there because I gave a very detailed account on Adam's channel, Adam's Fall, who's another member of the corner, that you could post. And but surprisingly, Mark, I would say that coming back to Catholicism, it did not feel all that different to me. And um, maybe it's because that my wife's cradle Catholic, married to my wife, with no expectation of conversion or anything like that. But we had the conversation of like she in her words that her faith, my faith is important to me, and that we would have any children that we had raised in Catholicism, and I was fine with that. And the expectation was that I would be there for the key family events, for Easter, for Christmas, stuff like that, and I was fine with that. And because I didn't have anything um, off-putting about my Christian upbringing, it was simply just something that I didn't didn't take seriously anymore, or didn't regard it as necessary or essential to my life. Um, And so maybe it's the case that I got familiar with Catholicism enough simply by attending those few masses every year for the first couple of years of, I guess, the first year and a half of our marriage. But I probably, and we all also went to weddings and stuff like that in Catholic churches. So I probably, if I had to guess, I probably attended maybe a total of like 8 or so masses. Yeah, probably single digits though, before I had my road to Damascus experience. Yeah.
Did you convert before you were married? Did
No,
you? So you didn't have a
no.
Catholic. You didn't have a Catholic wedding then, right?
No, we did, we did.
Oh,
So
you did.
the Catholic position is, um, if if the commitment is that any children will be raised Catholic, they'll do the wedding. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Especially, I remember some discussion when we were having a premarital conversation with, our church's priest. There was discussion about whether or not my baptism was legitimate by the Catholic Church, and it
Right.
was.
Uh-huh.
I remember that, but I don't. But aside from like that commitment as parents to raise our kids Catholic, there wasn't any. Yeah, I don't remember any resistance or anything like that.
Okay. And then because I did a little bit of reading on this, the some Catholic marriages I've ceremonies that I read about, the husband and wife serve each other the Eucharist, and the priest is the witness. Um, what? How did it go for you? Since your wife's Catholic, you were not. How did the marriage? What did the ceremony look like for you?
Yeah, I'm sure my wife took communion. I'm also sure I did not, but I don't remember all that clearly, the actual
Interesting.
wedding ceremony.
Sorry about that. I'm just
No, no,
curious.
it's
It's
okay.
my
It's kind of funny. Um, I mean, I remember on many occasions doing this and bowing my head and receiving the blessing. I remember doing that on many occasions. I'm sure I did that during the wedding also. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't remember all that much from our wedding day.
right.
No, and I didn't drink that much either. It was just like a lot a lot happened, a lot happens
Sure,
on that day.
I know that feeling.
Mm,
Yes. Um, so when did you talk? At what point in the marriage did you start taking it seriously?
mm. I had my road to Damascus experience. Um, so I can recount that. It's about a
You've done some of it. You got quite a bit on your channel about your story. Tell me
yeah.
what you want. Summarize it as best you can, and we can point to the relevant videos if you like.
Well, I I was in a stretch of my life in 2017 where I didn't know who I was and where I was going. It's very much an identity crisis. Like what's my purpose? And and that's when I found Jordan Peterson to be tremendously helpful in basically taking responsibility for your own life in all ways, shapes, or forms. And in retrospect, I see Jordan Peterson as a John the Baptist figure because I mean, what does it mean to make straight the paths of the Lord? Like, what does that mean? And it's we always talk about God as only speaking in the silence, like or a gentle voice or a subtle voice or like quieting our mind for prayer. And it's something like the making straight the paths of the Lord is something like cleaning up the things in our lives that we have control over, fixing the things that we have control over, simplifying things, cutting out. In Petersonian terms, this was like a lot of dead wood needing to burn off, like all the sin and vice and just self-centeredness. That's more of AA terms, but that was exactly right. And letting all that stuff go, and then something needs to fill it. And presumably, if you're aimed at the right, well, this is what happened for me. Like I think I was genuinely searching and aiming for the right direction, or as Peterson would say, stumbling uphill. And then when I'm stumbling uphill, God made His move, and I was at basically my lowest point because my brother had died 2 weeks prior,
Hmm.
and then I had a religious experience in a Catholic church, and that not only that, but that experience was centered around the Eucharist. Even though I couldn't take the Eucharist, the experience was centered around the Eucharist, and so that experience was something that the Neal of 2 hours prior would have said doesn't happen without psychotropic drugs. And then in retrospect, I think of that experience as like an incredible grace, incredible, because the idea of bread and wine transforming into the body and blood of Christ, the physicalist, materialist Neal of 2 hours prior would have scoffed at such a ridiculous thing. It's like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Um, you can call it whatever you want, but it's still bread and wine. That's what physicalist, materialist Neal would have said. Um, but the problem is that because I had this experience that broke any previous frame of reference I had in terms of what's physically possible in a normal world, then all things were back on the table, and especially in light of the fact that the experience centered around the Eucharist.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't bother me too much anymore because especially in relation to Scripture when Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you will have no part in me." And it's a double truly. Sometimes when Jesus really means something, he says like just truly or amen, I say to you. And then when he really means something, it's like the double truly. And that one's a double truly. And then his disciples after that say like, this is a hard saying, who can do it? So there's the debate afterwards where they're like they thoroughly acknowledge the ridiculousness of what Jesus is asking them. And then it says that many go away, and then Jesus turns to Peter and says like, are you going to go too? And Peter's like, Lord, you have the words of eternal life. Where else am I going to go? Or where else are we going to go? And that's sort of how I felt because I was at the lowest point in my life, and this was the only thing calling to me, and it felt irresponsible to not at least take the hand that was being offered to me and give it a firm shake and see if it stuck. Because I was still I chose doubting Thomas as my confirmation saint.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like unless I can put my fingers in the hole and unless I can actually see, then I won't believe. And that I realize that most people are not granted a frame shattering experience like that. And but what's interesting is that Jesus says to Thomas after he says, "Blessed are those who believe without seeing." And that is a humbling thing because it means that it is grace from God, but it's not like there's not a price to that. Like there is a price to our suffering, you could say, or a price to breaking the frame. Um, and there are I admire so now where I regard like the foolishness of people who simply believe what they're taught. Now I really do admire that. Like the people who can just stand by their tradition and wear their faith like armor and be comfortable even when but it's a tricky thing because there are those that I occasionally meet that wear their faith like armor in such a way that pushes others away that you know ri- uh yeah, pushes others away and uses it as a defense mechanism, whereas there are others that um are fine receiving the other in whatever form the other comes, but they've opened up their heart to God. Uh, this is a tricky thing. I've thought about this a lot, like faith as a container versus faith as a source and summit,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Faith is a container as opposed to a source or summit.
Mhm.
Uh, I think so. Explain that more because that's
Yeah.
develop that a little bit more.
Um,
As in a spring, like a mountain spring.
a mountain is
This
yeah,
because
mountain is
a
the image
spring
that
because
comes to me.
you say source.
Mhm.
I'm thinking like, okay, the source of a river may be just a little spring way up high in a mountain. But I'm trying to grasp your metaphor here. Help me out. Develop it more.
There's a psalm that I don't know which psalm it is off the top of my head, but there's a psalm that goes, "When we descend into the depths, you are there, and when we ascend into the heights, you are there." And it's my experience has been that we can clearly see God in the beautiful and the wonderful and the true, the good, and the beautiful. That's where we typically. It doesn't even matter how each individual person defines those things, the good, the true, and the beautiful, but whatever is at the top of those hierarchies for people, that's their way of seeing the world. Whatever's good, whatever's true, whatever's beautiful,
Right.
that's how they're defining God, their orienting principle. Um, but then I think where we're most broken, that's when God does his best work. When we're most searching, when we're most in despair,
Yes.
when we're yeah. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, sorry,
How
go ahead.
long did this go for you? What was the transition? How long, just
Yeah.
in clock terms, how long did it take for you to, when you decided, when you had the experience, to when you took your first communion as a Catholic?
Yeah. I'll walk through some events or some ways I was thinking about it as best I can recall. So that experience was mid-November of 2017. I immediately began journaling. I had never really journaled in my life up until that point, and I immediately started. I had all these thoughts coming to me, and it was like almost a creative explosion because it was a change in how I was thinking about the world. And I was very skeptical of, uh, it was not an instant trust or transformation for me. I was very skeptical of this experience I just had in that I said, well, at the very least, I just had a profound psychological event. That's what I remember writing and thinking. And so but I also could not abandon it because this thing presented, like Peterson would talk about the golden snitch, like when something's presented in the darkness to you, like that's the instinct for meaning. Like you have a when that presents itself, you have a responsibility to follow that meaning, especially if it's not apparent that it's a bad thing, you know, because that's how God often communicate. I mean, Peterson wouldn't say this, but Christians would say this, like God comes in the small and the humble and the thing that's glinting in the darkness. And so I knew I had a responsibility to see where that led. But the first thing I decided to do was I went back to the literature or the things when I was a younger man, the things that had dissuaded me from the faith. And I read Sam Harris, The End of Faith, and I looked at other things. I bought a book called The Bad Jesus, which was one of the few books I could find that was critical of Jesus directly. Most you can find a lot of books critical of the Bible from a moral standpoint, but not much that's critical of Jesus directly. So I had to I got a book on that. And what I was doing is I was testing this like very tiny nascent seed of faith that I had, almost minuscule faith. But in that test, like I read these things that had dissuaded me before, and they weren't affecting me negatively the way they did um, about 15 years prior. And instead, I found my faith like increasing a little bit. And as I was writing more and more and more, and, I think I was talking to here's another thing that was going on. This is probably more the truth of what was going on objectively, was that I don't know how often or how many of my wife's family was praying for me. You know, I like,
Mhm.
I don't know how many prayers it took. You know? So,
No one's ever done a statistical study of it, but I got a feeling that a lot of people have been brought to faith through the prayers of friends and family.
yeah. The Now, when I married into my wife's family, and one of the things that was so remarkable was that they would have broad extended family get-togethers, like cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and they would do this whole Christmas thing, and that was foreign to me because as a kid, I had a wonderful nuclear family. Like my parents were excellent, really excellent. Um, like, I didn't really know my cousins, I didn't really see aunts and uncles very often, maybe once a year tops, that's it. Like, grandparents, maybe a few times a year, but, it wasn't they were distant, and, um, and I remember my wife's uncle saying to me that, "Any children will be surrounded by love in this family, like, surrounded by love," and, like, that stuck with me, that image of surround and this is before I was Catholic, it's like being surrounded by love, and I was like, wow, there's something to that. There's something really special there. And seeing, I suspect being just as part of that family and enmeshed and seeing how they cared and loved and served and knowing that that was stemming from their faith, um, so there's the there's the prayers and how are the prayers affecting me, and then there's that. But as I was going through this, I was beginning to talk to them, and a different one of my wife's uncles invited me on a retreat, and I knew nothing about this retreat, and the retreat
Mm.
was happening in like May of 2018. And at the same time that I was like journaling and journaling and writing and writing, writing all this stuff, then I y- I got almost to the end of what I was writing, and then I went on this retreat. The retreat is called ACTS, ACTS,
Hmm.
and it stands for Adoration, Community. Uh, what's the T? Man, I should really know this. Service is the last one. I forgot the T. I should know this. Um,
Keep
and
talking. I can look it up, I'm sure.
yeah, and this retreat was exactly what I needed when I needed it. Um, you're not supposed to really talk about it in case people go on that kind of retreat, and but I will say I cried multiple times. I don't usually cry. Um, it confirmed all the things that
So,
yeah,
adoration, community, theology, and service.
theology and service. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so after coming out of that retreat, I was, don't get me wrong, like I was already on the path to wanting to do RCIA, rite of Christian. It's either Christian or Catholic initiation in adults, but that's the process that, yeah, I've
Right.
heard you talk about that once or twice, about starting that. But I decided, yeah, in September I'm going to start that, and coming out of that retreat. Um,
Was it difficult? I mean, the grokking that process, RCIA, or the theology. I mean, or was it all just like, a duck to water? You just felt like you were at home, and it's just like, okay, whatever. And what was the feel for you?
yeah.
Because you're skeptical. You said you're Thomas.
Yeah, yeah.
Is your patron saint. So
Yeah.
we
No,
both have fair issues.
by that time, unless there was something that like fundamentally rubbed me wrong at an axiomatic level, by that time I was firmly, I'm like, okay, I'm meant to go through this because hmm, I had learned to distrust my left brain, uh, if that makes sense, a sufficient amount. Like the calculating, the logical, the it's not like I threw logic completely out the window. That's not it. It's that I found in going to mass, and doing other things, like I found it was somewhat Petersonian, and I actually talk about this in relation to my faith to, um, other Protestants within the corner is I kind of joke that I'm a very dangerous Catholic. And the reason I'm a very dangerous Catholic is because I don't think of my Catholicism as a container that like I have to be in this container in order to practice the proper things in order to be saved. I think about it in terms of when Jesus says, God made the Sabbath for man, not man for the Sabbath. In that during my darkness, during my most difficult time, I could wake myself up an hour early, and I actually could go to daily mass, and I could make it through the day. And then I could do that again the next day, and I could wake myself up an hour early, and I could go to the daily mass, and I could make it through the day without doing anything stupid. And I did that for like 2 or 3 months. And then after 2 or 3 months, then I wasn't doing that anymore, and I was like, "Oh, man, am I a bad Catholic?" Because I stopped going to the daily mass, and I realized that I had kind of come out of the worst of my suffering, and then it hit me like, "Oh, God made the mass for man, not man for the mass, or God made this out," And so then I this is and I didn't meet Chad until several years after this, which is ironic, but it was the realization that, like, all these things within Catholicism, like the Mass, like Eucharistic adoration, that was another thing that was huge for me, huge. I could talk about that. Um, but all these practices that I basically just said, "Okay, I'm gonna assume I'm not as wise as the 2,000 years of tradition that went into making this tradition. I'm gonna assume I'm not as wise as that, and I'm gonna put on this mantle, and we'll see how it goes." And then and what's so ironic about that is in doing that, the few areas that I had serious concerns, not serious, but like I didn't my personal thinking didn't really align with the church. Um, and I found that those parts of me were worn down and slowly but gradually changed. And they were slowly and gradually changed in proportion to how virtuous or yeah, in proportion to how good I was doing with other people, how good I was doing in my marriage, how good I was doing as a father in proportion to how committed I felt to God. Like, yeah, it it was humbling in many ways. Um, but I was tired of like carrying around the things that I previously clung to. Yeah, and I found that the more I was able to let go of those things, that my suffering diminished in capacity to my with incapacity sorry, my suffering diminished in relation to my capacity to let go of things that I assumed were the most essential things of life.
Did the as Phlebas pointed out on one of my previous videos, the Reformed have a concept of real presence, as do the Lutherans, but it's not the same as transubstantiation.
Mm.
Uh, did the Catholic idea of real presence, that is, it's local, it's immediate, it is the did that bother you? Is it still a point of work for you? Um, I mean, I think the Calvinists and the Lutherans make the leap a little easier. It's not quite as fudgy as the Zwinglians. It's just all a memorial, a symbol. I think Catholic priests, or particular theologians anyway, seem to be particularly allergic to that kind of talk. But for modern people, it seems like, well, you say it's a spiritual presence. Oh, yes, I've done lots of Ram Dass. I can do that. That's easy, or something. That's very modern. We can say it's spiritual. But I think finer points of Catholic doctrine, they like to, I think it's very challenging to Americans, maybe Westerners in general, but I don't know. I think there's something cultural to us that want to resist a couple points, and I'm gonna start with just the Eucharist and the Catholic teachings around it.
Mhm.
And you mentioned adoration. Did you call it the adoration of the Eucharist?
Eucharistic adoration. Yeah.
Eucharistic adoration. So do you want to
Yeah.
go there with some of that?
Yeah.
Challenge both ourselves and our listeners.
Yeah.
Feel free to go if you don't want to go anywhere. You're also free to
No,
take this anywhere you want. You can, if you have things to tell me, you can do whatever you want with this. But though I'm going to keep pushing you with questions because I got a bunch of questions.
sure. No,
Until you
I
stop me, I'm going to keep pitching questions.
that sounds great. And I'm very much like I was thinking about this prior to the conversation, and I'm like a street Catholic. I'm a pretty normie Catholic in a lot of ways. We got people in the corner who are really theologians, and I'm like the school of hard knocks Catholic. I'm I I I don't think I'm that different in how I think about it though, compared to the typical Catholic that I meet who does take who does take their faith seriously. Like they're grateful for it versus like seeing it as a burden, or as a it's the switch from something that you're grateful that you have as an anchoring force versus something that you have to take on as an added responsibility. Yet my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yeah, that's man, that phrase always bothered me, and now it clicks so easily because it's like the more I'm able to trust, the less I am worried about everything else.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
before we go
yeah,
this direction, we could play
yeah,
that. We could approach it from another angle.
yeah.
Okay, you talk like you could be a Christian and not a Catholic. How essential to your Christianity, how essential to your faith in Jesus Christ is
Mhm.
your Catholicity?
For me, it's very important, um, for me, and so imagine you're climbing a mountain. Now imagine there's a single tried and true road that is the most traveled road, and the most people have gotten up to the top of the mountain via that tried and true road because it's been worn down. It's got a lot of markers, it's got a lot of things on that particular road up the mountain that are helpful. It's got places to rest. It's got signs. It's got, maybe when a crisis emerges, it's got like a place that you could, find shelter. There are other ways up the mountain. There are other roads, and some of those roads intersect and they cross and, they cover similar territory. But I think some roads up the mountain are easier than others. And the mountain, I think, is like infinitely tall. Um, so that's how I think of my Catholicism. It's like I'm really grateful for the road because, man, I need that road. Like I need it. Yeah, I'm not a Sherpa. Like, but I'm getting better. The higher I get up the mountain, man, I'm getting better, I'll tell you. Like, I really so, maybe someday I'll be a Sherpa, but, I'm getting
You'll
there.
you'll you'll be a hired guide to
Yeah.
help gringos up the hill. Yeah. So keep playing with that though. It's just because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, so it's
Yeah. Okay,
what's a
so
Eucharistic adoration?
Eucharistic adoration. So my wife's aunt invited me because I'm flying into this blind. Like, after that retreat experience, I'm basically I don't get excited for things easily, or, there's probably about, like, 6 to 8 major things in my life that I've, like, really committed myself to. Maybe more, maybe low double digits, but the Catholicism was one. TLC is another, by the way. I really takes TLC seriously, but that might be another conversation. But, but I think about it much the same way. I think about it like a road up the hill, and if the road is helping or hurting up the mountain. Okay, Eucharistic adoration. After that retreat, so there is Eucharistic adoration on that retreat where it's a time of reverence. It's a time of it comes from the passage in scripture where Jesus goes into Gethsemane and he brings Peter and James and John with him. And then he says, "Stay here and pray." And then Jesus keeps going, and Jesus goes and prays, and then he comes back, and the three of them are asleep. And he goes again and he prays and he comes back and three of them are asleep again, and he goes again, and Jesus at one point says, "Could you not stay awake for 1 hour? Like, could you not stay?" And so the idea of Eucharistic adoration is like, could you stay with me for 1 hour awake and focused and praying in prayer? And it's a concentration of your attention on that one point in what's called a monstrance. And you have the Eucharist in the middle. And if you meditate on one thing for a long period of time and you constantly direct your attention toward God. And to be honest, I haven't done it well lately. I found it easier to do that when I was suffering. I found it easier. Like I'm actually suffering in my day-to-day life like way less now. Mostly I would say because of the corner and friendships I've made and other things in my life that are really, really wonderful things. Um, but when I was like really suffering and looking for answers and like not even looking for answers, like looking for help, like help me, Lord, you know. And
Hmm.
Peterson had this saying where he was talking about prayer, and Peterson said, "Well, if you sit on the edge of your bed and you ask yourself, like, what stupid thing am I doing that I could change that would make my life better, but also make my life better for or the lives of the people in my life, their lives better." And you know, so I initially like going to Eucharistic adoration. I really thought about prayer that way, where I would just I would ask that question. I would say, Lord, like um, help me, or what am I doing that's stupid? Like, I would sometimes say that, like, what do I need to change? Like, what do I need to change in my life? Like, what do I need to and I would and then I don't know exactly when, but I learned about, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, where you do like a examine, the process of you're supposed to do a daily examine. I never really got into the daily examine, but I did do a weekly examine. And so the weekly examine in front of the Eucharist would be something like, "Okay, Lord, how am I doing in my marriage?" And I would wait, and I'd wait, and then I would get distracted by a thought and be like, "No, no, no." I'd come back to it, I'd be like, "No, no, no, Lord, how am I doing in my marriage? Like, how am I like, what can I do better? What can I do differently? How can I fix this?" Um, and then I would say like, "Okay, how am I doing as a father?" And again, I would like refocus my attention and be like, "Okay, no, 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 Lord." Like, um, and I would do that for like every aspect of my life. Like I would for work, for um yeah, for like everything I was doing in my life. I was like, "How am I doing in this?" And I'd refocus, and I would, you know, more almost always I would never get a direct answer, but sometimes I would. Sometimes, sometimes. Yeah. And so, but it would force me to devote that 1 hour of my week to not be distracted, to ask the hard questions about where I'm where I'm going, what I'm doing, what I need to fix, what I need to change. And yeah, so
When
like
did
it's
you do
so it
this? When did you do? What's the setting? Give me
Fri
describe this.
yeah, Friday every Friday night, 7 to 8 PM. I still do
Okay.
that spot. And it was in my local church at the time, St. John Bosco. And my local church has since closed, so I have to go do it at another church that's about 15 minutes away instead of 5 minutes away, but it's okay. Um, and I really liked it because it was in, like, the back it was kind of the back corner of the church. It was a closed room, and it was small, you know, maybe like 20 feet by 20 feet, but the room had a high ceiling, and I could sing in there, and it would echo, and so I wouldn't sing if there were other people there, but often in that 7 to 8 PM slot, I would be alone, and I could sing, and there were yeah, it was beautiful. I miss it actually. Like the Eucharistic adoration I do now is in like a smaller room that's doesn't have the arcing ceiling, but um yeah. So I would recommend I've actually recommended Eucharistic adoration to Protestant friends and just be like, just go and just because anyone can ask that question of God. You know, even if you don't believe in the real presence, you can just go and you have a place that is supposed to be still and silent. And like if you look up Catholic churches near me that have Eucharistic adoration, you'll find them and um and just like 1 hour where you focus on like what stupid things are am I doing. I really like that prayer. It's a humble prayer. So but
There's
most Catholics won't say that. That's my Petersonian bent on.
what won't they say? I don't understand. What wouldn't?
Well, they most Catholics would say well, most Catholics when they go to Eucharistic adoration would do a rosary or pray
Hmm.
um I mean, a lot of them do reading. a lot of them do just pray directly at, uh, towards the Eucharist. A lot of them, yeah. So all different kinds of prayers, like for the sake of His sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. That's a Divine Mercy Chaplet. That's common too. Um, Yeah, no, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's a lot of people going to, and sometimes there are specific days of the week or specific times of the year where the Pope calls for a specific type of prayer, like, yeah, so prayer for peace or whatever it might be. And so a lot of people do that too. I've never personally kind of like taken up the mantle of the Pope asking for prayer in a specific way. I guess I'm more selfish than that, but yeah.
Well, there's a lot there's a lot happening. It's in the Catholic Church. It's hard. I find it hard to keep track of it all. It's like one of those circus acts with lots of plates spinning.
Yeah.
It's hard to know where to focus your concentration. Let me play something. I played this for Ron Copperman on the Woo,
Sure.
and then get your reaction to it. It's a little clip from a Bishop Barron series. Gotta unmute. There we go.
Across the ages. And if I can press that natural metaphor, the church is meant to gather not just the people of the world. It's meant in some mystical way to gather all of creation, all of nature around the energy of Christ. St. Joan of Arc at her trial was being interrogated, and she said this about Jesus Christ and the church: I know this, they are simply one thing, and we shouldn't complicate the matter.
Overwrought production aside, wait. So, he's quoting Saint Joan of Arc, but he's also, in a sense, citing paragraph 795 in the Catechism, and the Church and Christ are one. Christos totus, I think, is the Latin. Whole Christ. The whole Christ is the church and Christ together. That's, see, in many ways, I'm just going to say, that's a hard thing from the kind of Protestantism I was exposed to anyways. And a lot of people want to fudge and do a yes, but kind of move on something like that. I think they mean it pretty, Paul Van de Clay, forgive me for using the word, pretty literally. It's actually, that is it. You want the whole Christ. It is His church and His body. His, and all the words fail us. What does that do for you? And are you familiar with paragraph 795? It's one of those that jumped out at me, and it just won't let me go.
No, not directly. I'm not a theologian, but I can give you the ground view of just on the ground how I hear and see and feel. I mean, we think of the church as the body of Christ. And we also think of ourselves as the bride of Christ, that we're the ones that are welcomed in, or the parable of the 10 virgins, or the keeping our lamps lit, or the wedding feast, parable of the wedding feast, where people who don't have the right garments are invited in, invite everyone into the wedding feast. And the church's goal is that we bring everyone to Christ, to the banquet, but also that they're properly clothed in the preparation. And so that it's that preparation of holiness. It's if you think of whatever comes after our lives, if whatever like the holy city is, if it's a truly holy place, it can't allow corruption of any. I mean, it's kind of like saying you can't have a fire in space where there's no air, or so the opposite would be like you can't have that corruption in heaven. So it's a matter of, okay, what do we have to give up? What do we have to let go of in order to be properly clothed? Um, so yeah, I mean that's how I think of the church again, as the body, the caravan that is being united with Christ. But there's always the immanentizing, but soon, is it now and is it always? And when I saw actually one big switch that happened for me personally is I started thinking of the kingdom of God as a process rather than a place. And whenever I saw Jesus talking about the kingdom of God, and I started thinking of it like a process, then it was like, oh, I see. So yes, the church, when it is in the process of bringing people to Christ, is already it's like fulfilling the destiny and the mission, the currently and already and soon and very soon, and all that's happening at the same time. Or when Jesus on the cross says, "It is finished," and dies, is it really finished? Because we're still living and we're still sinning and we're still messing up. But in some ways, it is finished because he's already, the mountaintop is set, the mountain is built.
No, what is it? You've got to. That's the question. Is you got
Yeah.
to identify the it
Well,
in the
I would
sentence.
say the it is something like we know how the story ends. Like we know who wins. We don't know how the rest of history plays out, but we know how the story ends.
Mhm.
And so it's just a matter of like the way I think about it is like, what role do I want to play in this story? What role do you want to play in the story?
Mm.
Um, there's always a Judas. Like somebody will be the Judas in the story. I don't particularly want to play that role. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
Well,
kind of
no,
off
it's just
track from what you
it's no,
said.
no. You're doing great. You're doing great. I'm just it's You describe yourself as a street Catholic, so maybe some of these questions are unfair to a street Catholic.
No, no. I mean,
Okay, you grew up. I mean,
Mhm.
you're not grew
Yep.
up. You're married to a cradle Catholic.
Yeah.
Yet she married you not being a Catholic.
It's even weirder because she majored at Notre Dame in religion.
Okay. Maybe she's a prophetess and she saw something in you. Say, where's Ron? Ron Copperman could explain this perfectly for us. She saw what you were and where you're going, and even though you didn't, so it's all okay for her. But so she takes her religion seriously. She
Yeah.
takes her
Yeah.
Catholic faith seriously. So then I'd love to have her on board to say, what possessed you to choose him then? So if she majored majored in religion at Notre Dame, I assume she's been through the catechism. She probably knows it pretty good.
She does. Yeah. I mean, she knows the rules and the structures, and she likes clarity. Like she likes certainty. She
Mm-hmm.
likes like this is the plan and this is the way things are and will be and should be, and structure. Uh and I I'm more what's the right way to think about it? I think of God as a storyteller, not a structuralist, not a creator of physics and math first, but I think of God first as a storyteller, and then everything else comes after the story. So if you read the Bible like God's just making it up as he goes along, Or if you read the Bible as like, no, the crucifixion and the resurrection was ordained, set. That was the foundation of the world. That's the first point that God wrote, that where God said, okay, this is the thing that sets the world. And now we got to make the rest of the story to lead up to this, and we got to do the story that comes after this. But this was the first thing that we actually positioned in the story. So that's what I think of as the source and summit versus a container. Whereas I would say my wife's faith is much more sincere, if you think of sincerity and authenticity, in that she is inheriting the tradition of her family and takes that tradition very seriously. And whereas I am trying to, yeah, I'm seeking. I'm still seeking, you know.
Well, I mean, this strikes me as a decades-long process. So I mean, it's just like, how do you? That's where the cradles have an advantage over us, I assume, because it's like, how do I possibly catch up with all this? You know, because this is like, the footnotes to the catechism are a great source for reading, but it's a lot of reading because it's like, just as I mentioned, one paragraph 795, I think they cite three sources: Aquinas, Augustine, and somebody else I can't remember, just as a supporting footnotes to a one sentence paragraph, or maybe two. So the advantage of someone who's been in it since the childhood, in a family that takes it seriously, I somewhat envy them, because it's like these are your natural waters, you know, you're swimming in. Just, to me, it's a challenge, because I kept running across ideas that I've been trained to be, you know, well, okay, both Church of Christ and Southern Baptist. Those were the two things. I was baptized at 9 into Churches of Christ, and then parents shortly thereafter started taking us to a Southern Baptist church, which theologically isn't a whole lot different. But and both of them, neither of them have sacraments. They just completely eliminated all 7 sacraments. No sacraments. They're ordinances. And real presence. Well, the Lord, wherever 2 or more are gathered together in His name, there He is. That's the presence. And yet I find, there was assistant pastor at a Church of Nazarene, in fact, the one where I met my wife at, who said when they were in seminary, he was a smarmy little guy, but he told me, oh yeah, in the dorm they did communion with Oreos and Coca-Cola. Even then, I'm like going, dude, that's messed up. Just didn't seem right then. I've always kind of leaned, intuitive leaned to, there's something sacred about this. There's something, my instincts have been more sacramental than symbolic. But you know what I'm saying? So the advantage, I'm just saying, I don't know what I'm saying here. The transition for me is it's both rich and challenging. It's like, yes, right, I like this. On the other hand, it's a little otherworldly.
I have this image that comes to my mind of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, or it would be Goldilocks and Protestantism, Catholicism, and Orthodoxy. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like, oh man, this is too weird. Oh man, this is too
Oreos and
bland.
Coke.
This is just right. It's
I like that. That's good.
Um,
No, it is. It does. In many ways, it feels right. In some ways, I can't figure out what the next step is. They're in a sense, it's funny. The Catholics are pretty good at branding, but really bad at sales. You get my meaning here?
yeah.
Because it's like, just tell me what the next step is. Just put it in the bulletin. It's not
Start
there.
RCIA in September.
Exactly. We've got a form. You fill out the form, and that's it. Oh,
And
there's a guy
honestly,
you can email, but he doesn't reply to the emails. It's like,
it's even worse than that, Mark, because there's a good chance that your theological knowledge will be better than whoever's teaching that class. There's a good chance. Not necessarily, but I actually had a college professor. I think he was a history professor actually, but he was one of the teachers of mine. He was quite knowledgeable. Like he knew Aquinas inside and out. So I had the luxury, but yeah, I think that's Catholicism's weakness as well as its strength is that you're not going to be dazzled by singular personalities within Catholicism. You're not going to be like, oh, this pastor is the one for me. Like,
they're trying that a little bit with the
Yeah.
Mike Schmitz videos,
Yeah.
He looks like Don Draper kind of. I keep calling him the Catholic Don Draper.
Nice.
The chiseled jaw, all that kind of thing. But he has this Minnesota Nice thing going too. And it's funny that he and Bishop Barron are in the same state, right? They're both Minnesotans. So they, or at least that's their base there now. But they're two different organizations, I think, unless I don't know something going on there. But it's funny that they're there. They both seem to be leaning in a little more towards making it, at least trying to communicate the message effectively. And they come with a lot of energy, but it's still, you're right. I mean, you're never just blown away by the personality. They don't have any Joel Osteens. For anybody who finds Joel Osteen appealing.
But it's funny, like we will totally steal the best sermons from Protestants and the best so I'm part of the leadership team now leading an Acts retreat in my neck of the woods, and we've got about 30 team members putting it on, and then we've got about 50 retreatants joining. So it's a big retreat, and it's happening at the end of April, and so it's and anyway, so like our spiritual director, he played to get us going. He played a sermon from a pastor it wasn't Joel Osteen, but it was a pastor at a mega church. It was an awesome sermon, man. Like not fire and brimstone, but more like just like God ordained you from the beginning of time. Like he had planned this. It was like TJ, the pastor was something like TJ, but it's like awesome, powerful. So, like we're as metagelical as the Protestants. Like this stuff is coming in from all directions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, it's the seven sacraments, and we have that framework that has remained. I was talking to a few friends earlier today, actually, about Vatican II, because I suspect. So I'm a weird Catholic within the TLC because I am very much a post-Vatican II Catholic, meaning that I don't know if I would be, and I love the Bible. Like I do a Bible study every week. I love it. I'm, a big part of the draw for my faith or what has grown my faith is in reading the Gospels again and again and again and again. Like I have gone over the God. I mean, there's certainly parts of the Gospels that I don't know very well. I'm sure that's true. But in terms of like what Jesus did and what Jesus taught, most of the Protestants that I meet, they know the epistles way better than I do. The Protestants in the corner. But I know the Gospels really well at this point, like really well. I've read them a lot.
Mhm.
And that has been absolutely instrumental in my faith, in that, these stories are still hitting me with the same ferocity
Mhm.
that they hit me even 7 or 8 years ago when I first was converting. Um, and Vatican II, I suspect, is going to play itself out over several hundred years. It's the way I think of Vatican II is you had Catholicism watching and assessing Protestantism for more than 400 years at that point. And through that 400 years, trying to assess, okay, what are, and I really think the Catholic Church has aimed to do this, not well and slowly, but I think they aimed to fix the corruption and fix the things in the areas that they could fix. And the latest is the sex abuse scandals, which we can talk about. And I hate the fact that they've been hidden. And yeah, there's awful, awful things that the church has done, and I'm not disputing any of that. But what I see that the church having done with Vatican II is looking back at 400 years of Protestantism and taking seriously, like really taking seriously, what were the things that were lacking in the Catholic Church, that like that humbled, for lack of a better word, like humbled the Catholic Church, as these Protestant traditions just did incredible things, both for their societies and transforming societies, founding countries like the United States, and abolishing slavery, and human rights and civil rights. And it's not that Catholicism didn't have elements of all those things, but I think Vatican II, they took the developments and the innovations of Protestantism really seriously. And so I said to my friends this morning, I said, okay, I'm gonna lay down the gauntlet a little bit. Name me one particular type of Protestantism, or one strand, or one core belief or core tenet that's a really good for the people, for a congregation or the people that you're leading, and B, is not exhibited or done in the Catholic Church in some way, shape, or form. Because post-Vatican II, we have a charismatic movement, and I've met some charismatics, and their faith is extremely strong and very powerful. And we have praise and worship music. I mean, this probably annoys a good amount of trads in the corner, but that I enjoy annoying them a little bit. But I play percussion. I mean, it's like electronic drums, like very simple. And it's just like the bells. It's like the bells part of Bells and Smells. Although our church is a humble community church, we don't have the smells except for special occasions. So it's just the bells. And I do that for a youth mass, which is the latest mass on our side of the river in New Orleans. Um, and so we have praise and worship music. And I mean, it's not as good as the mega churches, I'm sure, but like it's good. Like we have a good time, and we're praising and we're worshiping. And we have TLM. We still have the traditional Latin Mass, which has been suppressed in the recent past, but I think that suppression is a short-term phenomenon, because there's such demand from many, many Catholics to bring back
If
TLM in force. Wait, I'll
Yeah,
just
go
finish this
ahead. Yeah,
piece
go
on
ahead and
Vatican
finish.
II.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
Yeah.
so like we have the charismatic piece, we have praise and worship, and then the other thing, it's probably the salvation through faith versus salvation through works and faith, and that's a divide. But Pope John Paul II, who's one of the major architects of Vatican II, he wrote a treatise on the primacy of grace, which I absolutely love. And the idea of primacy of grace is that God moves first. It's like God has to move first in order for us to take his hand. Like he's the one offering his hand first, and Peter, and as we're drowning, we have to, as Peter, we have to reach out and take our Lord's hand. And sometimes he grabs us. Sometimes he grabs us forcefully, and thanks be to God. But that God moves first. And I love that. That's actually something for me that has transformed dramatically over 7 years, is my attitude toward confession, my attitude toward reconciliation, where now I see it as like a necessity and thanks be to God. And before, in the beginning, I was like, oh man, this is annoying. I don't want to do this. And that has been a transformative experience to be like, yep, time to go to confession. Let's do it. Like time to get naked before God. And I remember in the early stages of confession, it's like, well, I should probably go to a different priest because I don't want my local priest to know all this stuff about me because that's really embarrassing. And then it's like, gotta slap myself and be like, nope, that's precisely what it's meant to be. Your local priest is supposed to know. It's precisely meant to be embarrassing and humiliating. And because that's me. That's me. Like, that's it. And
Why
and
do
so
you think?
the reason I bring up
Well, I got
confession
two. Yeah, we're building up questions. Go ahead.
yeah, the reason I bring up confession and reconciliation is because this process of like, and I know once saved, only saved is a straw man. I realize that. But this idea that like there's not work to be done from our side. Like, yes, we are saved through God's grace, but this idea that like we don't have a responsibility to work in tandem with God. Like that Petersonian responsibility for me mapped precisely and perfectly onto Catholicism and the ongoing responsibility that we have to walk with God in our life on an ongoing basis. And so like all those aspects of Protestantism, like the primacy of grace and like all those things, like I see Vatican II having successfully incorporated so many elements of Protestantism that are wonderful things into the tradition of the Catholic Church now. Um, and it's at some point, it's like when does the protest end? Yeah, sorry, that was a long rant, but
No, that's fine. You just generated lots of thoughts, and so this is good. And that's in a sense, it's where this all began for me. As I'm looking around, I'm going, one, I don't have a specific church to go to right now, so I'm like going, I got to pick something. But I kept being drawn to wanting to go in this direction. I felt that draw 5 years ago. Periodically going all the way back to my teens, I felt an attraction to it, but I had good Protestant reasons not to. And then I suppose laziness at some other points. So, I mean, it's just, but this last time I'm like looking at the situation. Well, it's kind of a now or nothing, looking at my age and everything going, when opportunity, this is the time to give it a shot. And it was really built around, what's the point of the protest? Why are we perpetuating the schism? And if there are true Christians here, and this is if you as a Protestant can say this is a true church, then why the disunion? And why the resistance to accountability at the larger level? I mean, I'm not even sure the Catholic Church has a mechanism for opening up dialogue with independent mega churches. They should. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. It's huge it's kind of huge and bureaucratic in that sense. You never know what's going on within the church. On the other hand, it could be like, remember at the very beginning of so it's on the tip of my tongue, it's that series that was the cyborgs, they're doing the Cylons, they're doing, what's the show? The Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
At the opening of Battlestar Galactica, you got this diplomat, from the human side, who shows up at this space station somewhere in the middle of nowhere and has for, I don't know, is it hundreds of years or decades anyway, where they shows up and he waits. This is the very opening of this series, I think. And he's waiting for his Cylon counterpart to show up as a part of the procedure for their treaty of peace or whatever. And they never show up, but finally somebody does show up. A Cylon shows up and they shoot the guy. That's how it starts. But I wonder if there is such an office for dialogue between Protestant evangelical denominations and Catholic Church. I got a feeling it's kind of like that. They might open it up, and there might be a priest behind the desk, but nobody ever shows up. Because there doesn't seem to be a great deal of interest in... Nobody wants to be accountable to anybody. But accountability is at least within the Catholic Church built into the structure, which I find very appealing. Does that make any sense? Sorry.
Yeah. No, and what you'll find the more you go into the church is that it's like any bureaucratic organization, it's got plenty of problems, like plenty of problems. The New Orleans Archdiocese is slowly emerging from bankruptcy. My church closed. It's
Is that
interesting
to
because
deal with lawsuits, or was that?
yeah, I mean, in no small part, but it's not just that. I would say that post Katrina, New Orleans population still hasn't returned to what it was, uh, and so that the high point. I didn't even know this until recently, but the high point of New Orleans population wise was in like the 50s, and it started declining after. It kind of follows the pattern of a lot of Rust Belt industrial towns that post in industrial revolution, like post information age America, didn't really make the jump to an information economy, like mid-sized cities. And New Orleans is probably about 30 to 50% smaller than it was uh, at its heyday in the 50s. So, and then what's interesting is as Catholicism has expanded in other parts of the country, that as people are more curious about Catholicism, but also Catholics moved to other parts of the country, the opposite has happened in historically Catholic parts of the country, like Louisiana being historically Catholic. So Baptists move in, the mega churches move in, etc. So you have Catholics who had bad experiences in Catholic churches of some kind, but still want to worship God, moving to other churches. And so there's kind of like a general diffusion of people according to whatever they feel drawn to. And so in general, the church has not done well in the New Orleans area. Although I will say, just the last couple of years, we have there's been a decline in the number of catechumens, like new people joining the church, and also new priests. There's been a decline for many years. And just in the last couple of years, at least in the New Orleans area, that's gone back up. I don't know if that's a national trend, but a lot of new people joining the church, and I think that's a really good sign. So,
Yeah, what I've seen. See, I don't know about I don't think the San Bernardino Diocese declared bankruptcy. I could look it up probably. I know that nobody. I don't think anybody came out of that unscathed. In the United States, anyway. But here in Redlands, it's astonishingly healthy. I mean, it's possibly, when you take in the way Catholics and Protestants count bodies is so different. The they it's they but they're running 4 English services on Sunday, 3 or more Spanish language services on Sunday, I think, and plus all the other stuff. And they're full. I mean, you just can't. You try to go early; it's busy. You go to they're doing well, and it's diverse. I mean, really, that's the thing that I really enjoy. Is it's like lots of kids, lots of babies, lots of families, lots of teenagers, lots of even plenty of 20-somethings, and everything else in between. You know, every stage of life is represented within the same congregation. And the two chapels right now, they're doing they have 2 different campuses operating. They're going to combine at some point when they finish the new one. But it's the one I tend to go to that's closest to my house is a piano only. The one across town, 10 minutes away, has a praise band, has the drums and the guitar and that setup. So there's a little diversity there. I've yet to smell any incense though, so they don't do much in the smell side. But I've only done Sunday Mass so far, and I honestly, half the time it's like trying to figure out. Most of the time I come in and I'm trying to figure out what to do next.
It's a 3-act structure.
Okay.
So you have the liturgy of the word.
Right.
So it's always starts with the Old Testament, then usually an epistle reading, and then always a gospel reading. Sometimes that's different for feast days or special days.
What's your procession like? Because this one it's always children. Children are always they got the little robes on, and one carries the cross. A priest or a deacon probably holds the word, the Bible, up high, right? Does that. The priest is there, comes in, but the children lead the procession. So yours like that? Just pretty much no different?
My church is very humble, very small. So most dioceses in the country will have, like a single Catholic church will have 2,000 to 4,000 parishioners. You know, like you have a huge number beyond the Dunbar number of the people you can know.
Right.
And because of New Orleans being the way it was, we have all these churches like in every neighborhood where 100 years ago people would just walk. And like my church was historically an Italian neighborhood, and the Italians would walk to that church. So we only have maybe like 500 or 600 parishioners. We have 4 masses, and the church only sits maybe 200, maybe 250 if we really push it. In a typical weekend, we'll have 3 masses on Sunday, 1 on Saturday for the vigil, 4 p.m., which is an early vigil, but and we'll probably have an average like 100 to 150 people per mass. So it's small, I know many of the people, their faces, and I wouldn't say I know a majority by name, but it's So and the reason I say that is like the procession is for us is like usually the priest and like maybe 2 altar servers that are children, and that's it. Like adolescent children.
Part of me wonders it would be easier if it was smaller, because the one I'm going to is not a small parish. So it's like it would be a lot easier if you could just. So one thing is like the priest on Sundays is just swamped. So maybe I just need to show up to the weekly thing. I mean, the daily, go to the morning mass and just make my face visible there, and at some point find an opportunity to just like introduce myself.
Yeah, if you go to daily mass, way fewer people, and the priest will have more time. Absolutely.
Oh, he's clearly. I don't even try. I mean, I just appeal. I feel for the guy. I mean, and he's doing. I mean, it's a team. It's a staff. I
Mhm.
think I don't know. It's hard to tell who's who. It says Reverend in front of each of their names. They don't use Father in the bulletin, so there's no FRs in front of anybody's name. So
Huh.
is that unusual?
Yeah, I think so.
And I looked that up, and it turns out, oh no, that's a perfectly appropriate
Mhm.
form of address. You don't have to do Father. You can say Reverend. That's very acceptable. That was a shock to me. But then once you kind of get into the vibe of it, you kind of go like, everyone else is saying Father. I might as well say Father. I don't care. The Protestantism starts to wear off real quick. But then some have titles, other titles, and I'm trying to figure out everybody's qualifications, and but it's a team, and they're always. I mean, that on exiting after service, it's just like, whew, I'm just feeling for the guy, you know. Plus the wine they have to drink. I don't know how much, because they have to finish. They have to finish the blood.
Yeah.
They can't. That's another thing. There's no pouring it down the sink, folks. And doing so many services. Now I know they spread it out amongst themselves. So then if one priest is doing 4 services, by that last service, I would be staggering. I don't know what the alcohol content of it is, but yeah, that's a diversion. I don't know. Little details always have me wondering. Did you have? Were you? Well, okay. Your family is Presbyterian. You're the one your parents. Are they still active?
They attend church virtually. My mother had a stroke about 4 years ago, and she doesn't move around all that well. So, yeah. So they watch the service of their local Presbyterian church, basically.
Sure. Was that at all challenging to your family when you made the switch?
You know, Luke asked me the same thing, and the answer was no. But I realized that I think it's because my younger brother, did it first in college. My younger brother, 10 years younger than me, converted to Catholicism in college. And then he was my sponsor. Like, he welcomed me into the Catholic Church when I made my confirmation and First Communion. So I think he sort of paved the way. But yeah, my brother in college, he got involved in the local Catholic community, and really enjoyed it. And I don't know, my younger brother always just had like a stronger inherent natural faith, I guess you could say. I don't know why that is. I was more in love with science and technology and, that sort of stuff. So I think it's very strange because my Presbyterian parents successfully raised 2 Catholic sons. That's a joke that we tell.
That's a good joke.
It's very strange.
It's a good joke.
Yeah.
What about your secular friends? Did you have any close secular friendships going into this?
Yeah, my best friend from high school, well, middle school, high school, college, we were still close into our 20s. We're not as close anymore. We still talk on occasion. It's so ironic. Life is very weird. Life is very weird in that I introduced him to Burning Man. So I went to Burning Man twice. Second time I went with him.
It's its own religious experience.
And he became like a perpetual burner.
Okay.
So I mean, although the Burning Man stuff has somewhat deteriorated, it's so funny because as all institutions are being deconstructed, that's happened for Burning Man too. So he goes to like more regional burns, and yeah,
The weather stopped cooperating.
It's the Protestantism of Burning Man. It's like we are going to break away from the main event and we're going to do our own thing.
We want the
And the
pure,
spirit lives on. Yeah.
the pure
Burning Man Church, the original spirit of it. I'm dead
It's
serious.
true.
It's
I know.
the same, and that sort of thing wouldn't happen if there wasn't a need for it.
Yeah.
I take evolution seriously as a way that the world operates. And that was another thing that I was grappling with when I was returning to faith, is because I couldn't shake my belief in evolutionary principles, because I knew I majored in economics. I knew too much about about how the free market behaved, and Peterson talks about Pareto distributions, like winner take all scenarios, stuff like that. And one thing I knew was that people think of evolution as a biological thing, but it's not. Actually, evolution is a process that is followed whenever three things are true. In any system where three things are true, it's going to follow the same evolutionary principles. So one is that there's replication, meaning you have some sort of process that repeats. So it could be, some sort of process. The second is mutation, so that there's differences among those. There's differences among the participants that are participating in that system, and then that those differences occur, you could say. And then the third is what's called differential fitness, meaning that the outcomes of the system are different based on the strategies that are employed by whoever's in the system. So that works for, a really common example is in free market economics, where someone is able to produce something a better quality at a lower price, and they inevitably beat out the other party. So the way like Amazon has cornered the market by having like same day delivery. But then within an evolutionary framework, you have what happens is speciation happens, where so the competitors, so like here, Barnes and Noble, or not Barnes and Noble, Borders books did not survive Amazon, but Barnes and Noble is still, I think, clinging on just barely. There has to, like, Warren Buffett talks about it in terms of a moat. Warren Buffett used to, he's getting old now, but like he invested in companies that had a moat, meaning they had some sort of defensive fortress where that company was protected. Like Coca-Cola as a brand has like a very strong defensive fortress because they're differentiated from Pepsi or from any other. Another example might be like Apple as a brand, as a luxury brand that people trust and value, or Harvard. That's a great one, like Harvard as a brand. And so you have the same thing in colleges happens because you have a limited pool of participants that are looking for colleges, and then you have differential outcomes based on the school you go to. And so there's a winnowing. And the reason I bring this up in relation to churches, I forget the original point that you made that made me think bring this up, but within a church framework, there has to be. Oh, I know, it was Burning Man. There has to be something that's sufficiently differentiated within an institution for the institution to survive. I think this is also the same challenge of identity in the modern era, like the way that identity has become so important. So if I have my preferred pronouns or some, like, I have some way of differentiating myself from others that I don't like, or that I want to establish a distinction between me and those that I would rather not be in association with. So in a church setting, the reason this is significant in a church setting is that if a church splits or a church breaks apart, it's inevitable. One of two things has to happen. Either the church will cease to exist eventually, or it needs to be sufficiently differentiated from its competition such that new people will see that church as unique and want to come into that church. So I was thinking about this in relation to the way PVK talked about when people called up his church, and the people would call up and say like, "What kind of church are you?" And he can't say Calvinist because they don't know what that is. He can't say Christian because it's not specific enough. It doesn't actually
Right.
mean anything. Or I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Um, so what Catholicism has done, and this is related to the Vatican II thing, what Catholicism has done remarkably well is somehow under one tent, we have produced a variety of churches and a variety of styles and a variety of masses. But yeah, and so there's this concept. It's kind of a running joke, at least in New Orleans. It's probably a running joke everywhere, but there's this concept called roaming Catholics, not Roman Catholics, but
Yeah.
roaming. Yeah. And so like they'll go to whatever church has the priest that they like, or they'll go to whatever church is, like doing the thing that they like, whatever that thing is. Um, and that happens a lot, but Catholicism is big enough that it can actually have all these differentiated, like smaller churches. Like my church is actually part of the Salesians, and the Salesian order is a lesser known Catholic order, but they're huge, but they're lesser known, but they're known for the youth and the poor. They're not a particularly like academic minded order. Like there are these orders like Holy Cross. They're the Notre Dame order. They're like very intellectual. But the Salesians are like street Catholics. That the Salesians go into like the third world and teach kids how to become a plumber or electrician or how a sewer system works. That's what they do. And so they've expanded a lot into Africa and Asia. And
How do you find out what do you learn about the background of your local church like that? How do you find out that history?
well,
Because I have
knew
no
that they were.
idea what.
Yeah, no, most churches are just regular or diocesan churches. Most
Okay,
churches
so
are
that's
just
probably what
tied.
mine is.
Um, it's weird because you could be a priest in an order, like you could be a Benedictine or a Dominican or like all these different the Jesuits. Jesuits are well known. You could be a priest in an order. You still fall under the jurisdiction of your local bishop, meaning that so let's say you're a Jesuit priest that's in the city of New Orleans, you would still fall under the jurisdiction of the Bishop of New Orleans, but you are given special dispensation to probably do things as a Jesuit that are in line with the Jesuit mission that are different than your conventional priest. And you could be reassigned out to a different locale uh, because you do also report through the Jesuit structure. Um, so there's a nice balance within it, Catholicism, of like your regional principalities, like your bishop that's over a certain area, and then also your orders that sort of span all the areas. I'm trying to think of the right. Um, so an order would be like almost like a branch of government, maybe. I don't know. No, that's probably not the right analogy. An order might be like the nervous system, or and then but you also have the foot. So the foot has its own bishop of the foot, but the nervous system is also in the foot. And you know, sorry, it's
No,
a
that's
silly
fine.
analogy, but
It's very interesting. I brought up the catechism, right? And I started to look up, well, what's the history of the catechism?
Mhm.
Well, it turns out that the Lutherans technically would say had a catechism before the Catholics did.
Mm,
They a Council of Trent, or it was the Catechism of Trent or something like that, was the first official catechism, was a response to the Protestant revolt, Reformation. And now there were other manuals and such, but this was having that kind of level of organization. Everything the Catholic Church, basically all changes in the Catholic Church are driven by forces out of their control, it seems like, because it's like Vatican II. What's Vatican II? Well, okay, like I mentioned, the first catechism is a response to Protestantism. Vatican II is a response to World War II, Auschwitz, Hiroshima, modernity, really a kind of, Catholicism had been really just battered in the 19th and through the better half of the 20th century. And it seems to me like Vatican II was an attempt to kind of regroup and reassert itself as a force in the world, not just to be used and abused by it. And I think it was very successful, by the way. I mean, you look at just looking at the popes that came out of it, that followed it, and the demeanor of the church and how it's worked itself. I mean, overall, it was a successful reform, if you want to use that word. You get what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like, and you can keep going back. I mean, well, even ideas like Augustine go way back, like the responses to the heresies, right? They had no set rule until the heretics forced them to force their hand, so to speak. And whether it's the Donatists or the Pelagians or whomever.
I mean, sin plagues any institution, any framework. So you could then make the conclusion that all institutions are bad. But I think that's similarly Gnostic in that it's like, well, there's mosquitoes in the world, so the world is bad. I guess the reason I value Catholicism is not so much the institution in its present form, but it's the history and the way I talked about and the tradition, and I do mean that in everything that's learned and grown, and the way I talked about the path up the mountain, that's how also I think of the saints. And it's like you have all these different figures that have traveled up the mountain in the past, and it's all these stories of the people who have traveled, and then you can find solace in knowing you're not alone, knowing that others have dealt with similar things.
Well, it adapts to the Catholic Church seems to be very good at adapting without it adapts to challenges without being brought down by them, which that's the Protestant Paul talks about the life cycle of a church.
Yeah.
And it Reformed Zoomer, is that his name? That channel, the young guy who's a Reformation or Reformed Calvinist, 20-something. He points out that you go to a Catholic church, it's still a Catholic church. If it's stood there for 500 years, it's still a Catholic church. You go to a Orthodox church, no matter when it's been built, it's still Orthodox church. And his point is that that's not always the case, as you pointed out with New Orleans. So maybe that's not perfectly true, but they get challenged, and then there's something within this organism that is able to adapt to the challenges and not be killed by it. Will the CRC survive its current split? I think even Paul was like up in the air about it. Will the United Methodists survive what they're going through? Most people are betting against it. I mean, they there's something more rigid or brittle about Protestant denominations for some reason.
Well, okay, so once you do the initial move of the body has sinned, thus the moral action is to break away from the body, that sets a precedent. It set the precedent for the US breaking away from Great Britain in that way. Whether you like it or not, it sets a precedent. So it set the precedent for the Civil War, for the Confederacy to
It's
break away
true.
because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, this body is unredeemable, we'll break away. And so my I don't know what the limit of that is. Well, actually I do, which is like the church continuously sins, people break away and they start their own church and then the church sins again. It's like the foundation of any body you want to be like spotless, the spotless lamb without sin of this body. So you break away to start a new body and then inevitably there's corruption and then you break away to start a new body and you break away to start, and like now we're down to the individual. That's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Like so we break away from in every institution, whatever it might be. There's no institution that's been untouched from the last from modernity, I will say, you know. Um, and I suspect that I think the last 500 years have been like a deep breath almost of, I don't know if it's the breath in or the breath out, but I think it's been like a deep breath of saying, like we're gonna figure this out, or we can do better. Like we could fix it. We could do better, and it's been remarkable. Remarkable. We've had remarkable scientific progress, and I think the next 500 years is going to be a breath in the opposite direction. It's going to be like a return to something that's much much more stable, something that that's all intuition on my end. The the date that I'll pick for the beginning of the contraction, ironically, is the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. I think that's when it began. I think that's when the initial pivot began of like techno optimism. That was like the high point of techno optimism. Because that's like the modern Babel, if you think of it. It's not really modern, but it actually kind of is because it's like we're gonna the unsinkable ship,
Mm-hmm.
and the ship is like a symbol of like sailing into the future, um and
Yeah.
after that we sort of pivoted. We began pivoting towards like safety and humility, and it's probably a good thing ultimately, but it is a contracture from
It
the
was, you could say it was the first big blow to modern optimism.
yeah. And then World War One was like
Oh,
the
devastating.
the next one. Yeah, it was
Just bam.
horrible.
It's
Yeah.
devastating to the, and World War II. And like I said, Auschwitz and Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I mean, those events, I think those events put modernity into its meaning crisis, right? I mean, I don't, and you can just read the literature of the time and the philosophers, and it's clear that what we talk about in terms of a meaning crisis is all rooted in that response. We're probably still in that period, even though we tend to look at that as the olden days. I think it's more of a piece than we know. So
But
I
but
would guess we're still in it.
I think the big sort that had happened for the last 500 years was the sorting based on what's coming out of our hearts, you could say, or out of our, because I mean, this has really been accelerated the last 100, or the US is this in spades, which is like anyone can come here, the American dream, like anyone can make it, and you just need to be honest and hardworking, and you can, and in no small part that's still true, that's still going. Um, but what's changed is that, because of that great sort, like we've lost our identities as like uh people of a place. Like in my local church, for instance, that was an Italian neighborhood. It still has Italian roots, but it's no longer like united by that Italian identity. There's people from
Sure.
all over, and so there's not. Um, and so now the sorting is happening instead of by by sincerity, like where you're from. The sorting is happening by like what you care about. So the sorting is like I go to a church that like most closely adheres to my values, the things that I care about. And even within like the Catholic tent, it's like I'm going to go to this church because I like this and I like this and I like this. It's like a inward out choosing versus an outward in imposition of like this is who I am, you know. Um and so I think like we're going to have the structure is going to return. What I mean by the structure is like I am this and I am that and I'm but the structure is going to be based on the choices that are being made in this generation and the previous generation before that in terms of the things that we cared about. Um if that makes sense. Like
Well,
like we're
only thing I
yeah.
would say, I think I understand what you're talking about. The only thing I
Mhm,
would say that the challenge it would be that I don't think Christians of whatever flavor
mhm,
have reached a point to where, by and large, there's just you might call it an ideological centricity, or we still tend to think we are doing it the best. Period. We can't. That Protestant impulse
mhm,
is still driving us apart. That
mhm,
we have the division. I mean, the angle may have gone from this to this,
mhm.
but we're still not moving together as one. We're not. There's not a intermingling happening yet. Uh, Maybe the corner is kind of a little glimmer of something like that.
It's not happening at an institutional level, but it is happening at a personal level. You know, like the amount of people that have friends that span different religious
Right.
denominations in their local community, I think is pretty high. But what's different, I think, is like, and this is honestly, this has been the case for me, is like I have a much more difficult time making friends with people that don't have faith or
Okay.
aren't seekers in that way. Um,
Kind of difficulty finding things to talk about, in a sense, or bond
yeah,
around, or
like there has to be a minimum set of axioms or ways of seeing the world we're charting the same nav map, so to speak, or navigational chart. Yeah,
yeah. Well, I don't know.
and
We've been going for an hour and 47 minutes. Do you
mhm.
have, is there anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't? Did I miss the boat completely on something that you think we should talk about, or?
No, I don't think so. I what I will say is the sorting that's happening based on our hearts, I think, is a good thing. There's a line in Jeremiah where the prophecy is like, and I will write the law in their hearts, and they will be my people, and I will be their God. And that's in Jeremiah. And I really think that's right. I think that's how Jesus operates. I think that's been the plan all along. Who is my brother and who is my sister? The one who does the will of the Father. You know, I think it's a more honest Christendom and Christianity that that we are judged based on our actions. You know, so yeah.
Well, thanks for the time.
Mhm.
Um, we could probably, there's a lot more to talk about, I'm sure, and I'll probably have a whole bunch more questions as I go through all this. Um, I hope you found this to be fruitful.
I think so. Yeah, it was fun kind of thinking back in the early days of being Catholic. Now it is kind of the water I swim in, but I have most of my friends are Protestant. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, your best online friend, anyways, is Chad. I don't know
Mhm.
how much real world integration there is in there, but you said that you still talk to Chad regularly, right?
A lot. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a mild fight about 3 or 4 days ago, but we're on the mend. We're on the mend. It's okay. We'll be good.
I won't ask what about, even though I'm curious. I mean, that's the thing with the corner. If you do if you develop friendships in the corner, you're going to have pretty wide spectrum, and how many Catholics do we have? We have Cal, we have you. Anselman is a kind of Catholic. He's not Roman Catholic.
You're right. I mean,
Anglo-Catholic.
Kale is probably the best known.
Kale. I forgot
yeah.
about poor Kale. Yeah, Kale.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is the best known, most overtly.
Mhm.
But he complains about an awful lot.
Yeah.
He's one of those is he full on trad Cath? Would you call him trad Cath?
He's not. I mean, I would say he's more traditionally minded than I am. I'm sure I have thoughts that are like, for example, I now think of postmodernism as a necessary phase. Like I don't think of it as something to fight against anymore. Like I see the postmodern times that we're living in leading people to the necessity of faith. So it's I've adopted a lot of it. Whereas like Peterson was so hard against postmodernism, my thinking on it has really flipped. Whereas I see it as something that's inevitably bringing us to our knees because like the things that like we need to find meaning and value and purpose, and there are certain things that cannot be deconstructed. And yeah, so that's probably a way in which I differentiate from the trads a little bit. But like the trads have their place. Like they have an important part of the story, and that part of the story is to be an anchor, to be those that carry on, and just keep going and being an anchor. And
let's define our terms real quick. Trads are, I mean, I know, like, okay, that's Mel Gibson, right? That's ultra trad. Isn't he like a super fundamentalist type Catholic? And his father was, and
this is, yeah. I mean, this is really hard to define because
then there's Pints with Aquinas. And they're not the same though.
I think he's pretty traditional. I mean, there are traditional Catholics that go to the Novus Ordo, which is the new mass, but they still this is hard for me to put. Like one line in the sand is whether people see Vatican II as a good thing or a bad thing. I stand on the good thing side of that. Another line in the sand is like who goes to the TLM, traditional Latin Mass, and because okay, you could think of these things as anchors of identity. That's a good way of thinking about it. With the TLM, with traditional Latin Mass, you have a special language, you have special words, you have and it's these are all identity markers, the way like Hebrew works for Jewish people. You have these ways of binding a group together that unites them around common goals, values, all those things. And the traditional Latin Mass within Catholicism does that for the people who really value the traditional Latin Mass. And that's why the Catholic Church has generally been anti-TLM, because they see it as something that's like separating or segregating people that are binding over this thing versus the faith as a whole. But I am loath to, like, I just don't believe in forcing people to choose something that's part of our tradition, if that makes sense, that's not. So like I want what I want. I do want to give people the freedom to follow their hearts and their yearning and see like, because I don't know. Like I love the United States being a laboratory of democracy, of the 50 states, like each get to try out different things and see what works. And I love the fact that Catholicism has all these branches and all these orders and ways of thinking and practicing, and the diversity of the giant tent. I love that, because that, in my mind, that means that the Holy Spirit can do its work humbly, and we're not like forcing people into, yeah. Anyway,
but there is one of the groups that as controversial as SSPX, Society of Saint Pius X,
Hmm.
and I couldn't quite remember off the tip of my tongue, so I had to pull it up to make sure I had it right. But now they want to have the authority to consecrate or ordain their own bishops and that sort of thing, which is pretty Lutheran Protestant type of move, right? I mean, it's in a different direction, but I mean, it's still to me that's too much, and that's going to that's going to ultimately get them. I think the Catholic Church is so patient. That's one of the things that is. I mean, its history is one of the reputational history is one of being intolerant and cruel. If you drink the Protestant Kool-Aid growing up, like I did, what looking retrospectively at it from where I am now, I see it as very slow to judge and to. I mean, they tolerate these groups. It's not about the Latin Mass. That's the funny thing. It's not the Latin part that has the Vatican upset. It's the sectarianism that has them concerned. But they'll wait. The same with the German bishops. I'm guessing both are going to find themselves on the outs if they keep pressing their luck.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that the church is remarkably tolerant. Remarkably. Yeah. And I think that's the church learning its lesson from Spanish Inquisition and other things like that. Like they don't want to be that guy anymore, but yet they've been remarkably tolerant, and yet I would say adherent and adamant regarding core principles, the things that the church believes, the things that the sacraments, stances on moral stances. Yeah.
What I've kind of come to, I'm sorry for the time. Just tell me when you got to go. We got to go. We'll close it. If you want to give it. It was just what I'm looking at though is it seems to me that at the center of this thing we call the Catholic Church is the Eucharist. And everything is in service to that. Whatever we do, however it's always in service to that which is the body of Christ, the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And we're not going to let, I'm worried again, I'm oversimplifying, no doubt, but as I try to study this history and try to get a grasp on what's happening here, they seem to be, it's always about protecting the people's relationship to the Eucharist and keeping, does that make sense to you?
Yeah. No, but I would say it's about preparing us to be united with Christ, generally
Right.
speaking, which is in the Eucharist,
In the
this
Mass,
life.
locally.
Yeah. But the Mass, yeah, no, you're right about that. But also things like reconciliation and confession. And I think reconciliation, sorry, when I say confession and reconciliation, they're synonyms, they're the same thing. It's just called the sacrament of reconciliation. Um, I think the sacrament of reconciliation is really going to make a comeback. And I've thought about this a lot, that the need to openly and honestly and nakedly confess your sins to a person, and not only that, a person who knows you, and hear the words from another human being, "You are forgiven." Um, I don't know, that it strikes me that is much more essential than I used to think it is, and it also strikes me that that's how all maybe I'm wrong about this, but that's how many revivals start, is that people are like publicly and openly confessing their sins, and the revival begins when true repentance begins, and so that preparation stage of receiving the Eucharist and being united with Christ, I think the emphasis on the good, which is the unification of Christ, has often not emphasized the importance of repentance and um, basically confessing and being forgiven for the bad. And I think those two things are directly related. And Like I said, I don't think it's wrong that we emphasize the Eucharist, but I suspect that that reconciliation is going to make a comeback. Not in the same level of importance, but just the focus
Well,
on it.
all of the sacraments service,
Mhm.
it's all of a piece. That's what
Yes.
makes the whole. I mean, I guess that's what makes Luther's move so ultimately impossible
Mhm.
For Catholics to tolerate, because he gets rid of 4, then he throws out a 5th one. By the time he's done, he's got 2 left. I mean, that's a gutting of the religion.
Mm.
Because you can't even approach the Eucharist without confession,
Mhm.
and you don't get to either without baptism.
Mhm.
Well, I guess it's reverse, but marriage is theoretically the one that I guess is maybe the most potentially adaptable to change. I mean, because it's unique in that sense, right? It's not directly related to either baptism or the Eucharist or confession.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean there are the one-time sacraments, marriage, baptism, and then there are the ongoing.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's at the very least it's fascinating stuff. But thank you for talking with me about all this, and I, like I said, I hope I did the subject justice.
We explored a lot of territory, and I appreciate you inviting me on, and um, yeah, I've been thinking about you a lot. So yeah,
I appreciate it.
yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, I just am a little. I wish they were a little better at sales. Good at branding, but not in sales. Help me close this deal, guys. I want to buy a car.
Well, my advice is go on a weekend retreat. It doesn't have to be like something that's intensive, that is a Catholic weekend retreat. And you could, even though you're not Catholic yet, you could find something and go, and yeah, and it'll help you
That's
discern.
another thing is what can I
Yeah.
participate in, even though I still don't even know. I'm reticent to do all the hand motions still, because it's like, I don't do the this and the that, and because it's
Yeah.
like, one, I
On
don't
our
even know if I'm
minds and on
qualified.
our mouths, in our hearts.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm qualified for any of this stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, no,
I
there's a
had I had
13
my
hour.
I had my first confession on that retreat before I was Catholic. So,
Oh, okay.
I think I'm still forgiven of my sins. He forgave me. I wrote down the worst things of my life on a piece of paper,
Interesting.
and my hands trembling, and and then I afterwards we burned it up in a fire, and it was tears down my face. It was amazing. So,
Interesting. There's a 13-hour adoration of some kind, for leading into Palm Sunday. And
mhm.
I would love to go, but a part of me also goes 13 hours from
Yeah,
six
there
at
are.
night to
Mhm,
7 in the morning.
mhm.
With that, you've seen that sort of thing at your church.
Yeah, I haven't done it. There are definitely silent retreats that do that sort of thing, and they go even longer, and I haven't done a silent retreat yet. I suspect at some point, but
Yeah, it's like one of those things. Yeah, at some point I probably will
mhm,
have to do it. I'm like
mhm.
going. It's just
Yeah,
like
if I saw someone,
daunting.
Brett in the comments said, Cursillo. If you search for Cursillo, Cursillo retreats, Axis uses the Cursillo method, or yeah, I
Okay.
don't know how to pronounce that, but yeah, it's not a silent retreat. So
Well, at this point, I've taken up your time for 2 hours, so I
yeah,
appreciate it.
no problem.
And you have a thanks. Thank your family for me.
Wednesday's
And
my open night, so but appreciate you, Mark.
all right,
Thank you.
thanks, Neal. God bless. See you guys.
Bye bye.
Come on, work with me, button. Work with me.